Yes, because I've noticed I'm of course the last speaker, and the bar was set very high by all the other speakers. But I thought, let's start with you. Start with an audience question, because in the end, it's all about you, right? It's not about me. So maybe you has a story to share. Who ever worked at a job they loved? Can be your current job, can be any job. Who wants to share? And why? Tell me why you love it. Why did you love that job? Come on. Thank you.
Job as a developer,
Yeah.
I kind of realized that we were working, round the clock. And my colleague, he actually asked me, we said, hey, Peter, you realize that we are doing the best there is in life, and someone is actually paying us. Then I felt this is a good job.
Yeah, it's a great job. Anybody have another story to share about a job they loved? I saw lots of hands raised. It's a bit scary, of course. Yeah, I see there.
Hi. I worked at a company that were really flexible on how we worked, how we achieved our goals. We had clear goals, and we were 80 people reorganizing, collaborating, and it was really fun and engaging.
Why did you leave that job?
It was bought up and broken down.
So, it happens. So yeah, that makes me to the other question, right? So who ever felt like quitting at their job, any job? Raise your hands. See many hands raised. So who worked at a job they loved that turned into a job they hated? I mean, you already kind of, yeah. So maybe can somebody tell? I'd love to hear a story like someone that worked at a job they loved that turned into a job they hated.
Yeah, so I used to work for also like a small company, maybe 80 to 100 people.
Yeah.
It was like
Heaven.
it was heaven, yeah. And I became a product manager at that company, and it was great, and like awesome leadership and everything. And then we got acquired.
Oh yeah, acquired.
Yeah, and then like the micromanagement came in, and it was like I don't know, a lot of people left, and it was not fun to work there anymore.
Classic story, classic story. Anybody else have a story to share? Last one, maybe.
I can share. My story is a bit different, but the thing that made me not like my job anymore was my manager.
Yeah. Oh, that
A
sucks.
change of managementship changed my whole perspective.
Yeah. I've been there as well. It's a common problem. So why am I asking these questions, right? So actually, the first seed for this talk was planned more than 9 years ago. And yeah, this talk has been made possible because I'm a really unreliable employee. I always left companies. I never worked there for long because I got frustrated or because I was like, hey, it's time for something new. And yeah, so I've been through many ups and downs, like moments where I really loved my job, moments where I really hated my job. And so this is one of the lows. I was sitting in a meeting room with a C-level executive with 10 product managers. And he literally said to all of us in the room, imagine that, I don't trust any of you. Let that sink in. How would that make you feel? Not good, right? So I actually had to send like an ex-colleague a message because I was like, I'm still flabbergasted, astonished, but this really happened. And yeah, this made me really reflect, like, why does this happen? Because this person was actually very smart and very good at his job. And this was actually the beginning of my journey. And yeah, so it made me realize like product management and Agile are infuriatingly difficult. It's extremely challenging to do well. I mean, we all talk about it and we understand it really well, but how? And I started asking myself, why is it so difficult? So let me start with my first job as being hired as a PM. So once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away, I was hired as a PM. Well, actually, someone was foolish enough to hire me. Maybe that's the right way of putting it. So I had applied to like 200 jobs, rejected. And there was a startup that believed I could do the job. Well, big mistake, because actually 6 months in, the imposter syndrome kicked in. So I felt like, why did I take this job? I'm completely incapable. But then I stuck with it, right? And my team actually I was working with became high performing, and I was elated, like, oh, great, you know, no more. I was not worried about getting fired anymore. But then my manager said, "Hey, Maarten, your team is performing great. Why don't you take another team?" And then you see my happiness depth a little bit, and then I became happier, and then I got a third team, a fourth team, and a fifth team. And then I hit rock bottom, and I was like, screw my life, I'm ready to quit. So I actually told this to my manager. I was sitting with my manager in one-on-one and said, look, 6 more months like this, and I quit. I cannot handle it anymore. And my manager then said, well, maybe you should go somewhere else, because we have a Barcelona office, it's not running so well, and you're good at this, and then you'll have only 2 teams. So I moved to the Barcelona office, helped them there, and then I was exhausted. And then I had a very important realization, or at least I thought. And the realization was, I want to work with people with lots of experience. So to be frank, I didn't have a lot of experience. I was early 30s, but I was one of the people with the most experience at the startup. And then I thought, if I'm going to work with more experienced people, we're going to have better teams, and life is going to be great. I see people already laughing. So then what happened is, actually, I remember I got a call. I was at a wedding in Poland, and I was elated. I got hired after 8 interviews. Yes, 8 interviews, terrible. Intelligence tests, psychology tests. I don't know why I was still passed all those tests. And then the first day of the job, my manager sat down with me, and he said, Maarten, you're going to be so happy here. You have the best team in the company. They're performing so well. And after my first week, I was thinking, what the hell is this mess? And that team was actually not delivering fast at all. Of course, I was used to startups, but I was thinking, this is just this big mess. Half of their tickets were spikes, you know what I mean? So half of them were investigations, not delivering any value. And of course, I got them running smoothly after a while. I felt great. And then, can you see the pattern? The same thing happened, but this time I became smarter. I learned. You know what I said? Well, I can help another team, but I can do max 2 teams. So then I got another team. And then you might be wondering, why is his happiness still dipping? Because he's not getting more teams, right? But the reason was actually, and that's what I actually had 5 different teams I moved to. And then I hit rock bottom again. But that's because what I just told you, I kept bumping in these walls. And literally the moment this manager said, hey, I don't trust any of you, I was just done. So I was wrong. Lack of expertise is not what makes product management difficult. It's actually this, and I'm going to tell you. So basically, when you're interviewing for the job, it goes kind of like this. Maarten, how many years of experience do you have wrestling bears? How many bears have you wrestled with? What's the biggest bear you've wrestled? And then when you're done, you feel like the king of wrestling bears, right? And then you join the company. You're like, what the hell is happening? Godzilla is fighting King Kong, and where are the bears? I was hired to wrestle with the bears. There's just big delta between the theory of the job and the reality of the job. And so why is there this massive delta? And this is actually where I came up with a model to help with that. I call it the Kraken. So in every organization, there's this big Kraken, this monster with all these tentacles, and they prevent teams from doing the right things. And the Kraken just makes simple things difficult. Like the story with the Post-it, right? I worked at a company where literally they had gray Post-its that didn't stick, and I was not allowed to buy colored Post-its. So I actually got a complaint from HR that I bought colored Post-its, because it was like, yeah, I need Post-its to work. So the Kraken is like a counterproductive organizational system for teams. So who's ever worked at an organization with a very big Kraken, like with many departments, policies, rules, processes? Does this sound familiar? Silos? Is it fun to work with a Kraken? No, I see many people. No, it's terrible, right? And so what happens is you have all these, I call these brittle teams, right? So there are teams that are overstretched within the organizations. The organization is keeping them busy with all these silly rules and all these silly roadmap processes and all this bureaucracy. And that means they are no longer busy talking about the customers, the business. So yeah, if you get a large Kraken, you've got brittle teams. And what does that mean? You've got teams that are like circus animals, like they're busy jumping through all these internal hoops because that's what the organization expects. And that means that they are no longer flexible. They can no longer adapt because they're flexible and adaptable towards the organization. And why does this happen? Because many organizations simply don't trust their people. And if you don't trust your people, you will develop an organization where you can't trust your people. So what happens is leaders don't trust their teams. So this is actually the insight I had because of the manager, right? So you get all these processes, rules, and hierarchy so that you don't have to trust your teams. For example, you have to do the roadmap in this way, the business cases have to be in this way. And then as a result, people are just thinking, wait, we need to produce this PowerPoint template with these colors. How do we do it? And that becomes the thing they care about. And then they don't deliver. And then the leaders don't trust their teams. And so the cycle continues. So in short, distrust breeds distrust. So now I'm going to present you my model. So luckily, the Kraken is allergic to chocolate, cacao. And we can use that to defeat the Kraken. So I will start with a nice story to illustrate the whole model. Sonos. Does anybody have a Sonos system in the audience? I see many hands raised. Did anybody's Sonos system break down because of the update? Maybe you want to share a story. What happened? Is it maybe nice to paint a little picture? Sorry, I hope we still have the microphone. So, who was raising their hand to tell? Anybody with the Sonos system who broke down? I think you were. Yeah, you want to share?
It's on? Yes. Yes, I have this Sonos system like many of us, right?
Yeah.
And just a couple of weeks ago, I actually went to a neighbor who also has this system, and I'm never using the Sonos app, to be honest. I'm using Spotify just to cast through the system. But this neighbor, he needed to upgrade his system because he got a new Wi-Fi. And then I just realized that I have broken the app totally. And I was so disappointed. I was so devastated. I actually messaged a friend, what have they done with this? The ecosystem is totally broken. So, yeah, that's like the story.
Yeah.
But
So
it's no news.
it was basically a nightmare update. I got a phone call from my mom at night. My Sonos doesn't work, can you help? And I said, well, like, I'll get back to you tomorrow. And then I told her, like, yeah, I cannot help you. So how did Sonos end up here, right? Because Sonos was a company with a really good reputation, with great products. So let's start. So Sonos decided to rebuild their product. Already pretty terrible idea, but or questionable maybe. But that's where the problem started. But that's actually not the real problem. The other problem was they went public. So they had shareholders they had to please. And then they also had new management who decided to restructure their teams to silos. They decided to launch more products because the shareholders wanted to see money. And they also decided to get rid of QAs. So these were all decisions on the organizational level. And then the rebuild, right? So the rebuild was not a bad idea, but actually the tech people had said, hey, we're going to do the rebuild, but we're going to do it right, as long as it takes. And then suddenly that became, no, it must be finished before the Ace headphones, because they are tightly coupled, what you were talking about. So they were tightly coupled. So now there was pressure to do the rebuild. And actually, the goal became to deliver the rebuild as quickly as possible. And then what happened to collaborations? Actually, developers were saying, it's not ready, we cannot release, it's going to be a disaster. And that meant that actually that these developers were yelled at by their managers because their managers got pressure, you know? And the teams were organized in silos, so that had a really negative impact on autonomy. And in short, teams lacked context. It's like ship it no matter the quality. So I think all these points were covered today, like the organizational system, alignment, collaboration, autonomy. So this is the model. It cost Sonos 500 million euros. And they still haven't fixed it. I think CPO was fired. CEO might even have been fired. But like many people were fired. And that's like 1/3 of their revenue. And why is this model so important? It's because the bottom of the pyramid constrains the top. You are a few wrong decisions away from having a counterproductive organizational system that actually is the bottleneck for context, collaboration, autonomy, and all these other alignments. So teams, in very simple terms, do work to create value. And value can be anything, right? It can be outcomes, it can be money, it doesn't matter. And of course, if the work is linear and predictable, I don't have to tell you, life is great because it's easy. You don't need to worry about having brittle teams because you're not going to have surprises. But the problem is that delivering features is like telling a joke. Delivering a feature doesn't mean you're delivering value. Just like telling a joke doesn't mean people will laugh. That's why comedians have tryouts. You know, they make jokes, they look at the audience, they see whether they're laughing, and yeah. So the reality is you need these flexible teams because it's messy and it's unpredictable, and you need them to be flexible and adaptable. And that's what I call elastic teams. So where they are not busy with the organizational, the kraken fighting the tentacles, but they're flexible and adaptable. They score high on the cacao model. So I want to stress, so this is another story just to hammer the point home from personal experience. You are a few wrong decisions away from creating these brittle teams that are just not going to deliver value. So I worked at a company that decided to rebuild their product. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Plus, it must work the same as before, but better. It must serve a new market. And the CEO's birthday is coming up, and that's the deadline. Good luck. So who thinks it was delivered on time? Nope, was not delivered on time. So actually, it was delivered far too late, and it was actually scrapped completely. So the company probably lost like 10 million. They were completely doing a rebuild nobody wanted. So this was just a few wrong decisions, right? A few wrong decisions, and you create teams that just don't know what they have to do. So why does this happen, right? So these are three of the major reasons, in my opinion. I think a lot of people in the leadership team struggle to understand not knowing what you will be doing is not the same as not knowing what you're doing, right? So messiness or surprises doesn't necessarily mean you're incompetent. The other problem is because we have these surprises, we try to get awesome at predicting, right? But the problem is that's a fool's errand. Actually, when you try to prevent sucking at predicting, you will guarantee to suck at adapting. Right? Because you're injecting your plans with speculation and noise, with all these wrong assumptions, so you're only going to make life difficult for you later down the road. And the third reason is better coordination. So talking about doing stuff, all these plans, like it doesn't fix poor collaboration. Like we heard in the previous talk, right? Putting people in the room, collaborating together, like with the suppliers, that works. Not if you try to write perfect paper documents with requirements, and good luck. So I'm going to start explaining the model again from the top. So the top is more at the team level, and then at the bottom you are going to get more at the organizational level. So the first obstacle, missing context. So basically the goal of the work is to finish the work. Does that sound familiar? Has anybody worked at a company already said, we have to deliver this feature in 3 months? That was the goal? Raise your hands. Yeah? Very common. And that means the team cannot take ownership over results, right? Because the goal is to deliver the feature. It's self-referential. So how do you see this? Right? If you have a team that needs a lot of hand-holding and instructions, whenever something happens, they're going to ask you, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? Because they don't know what they're doing, except the goal is to deliver this feature. You see the product backlog is purely focused on solutions. If you talk to someone, why are you doing it? They're like, I don't know, like acceptance criteria. So, and they're always asking for instructions clarification. So, like they're like the hungry caterpillar, always wanting more food. And I'm a product owner, right? So I always had to answer all these questions. And yeah, the other thing is they're unable to reframe their problem because they don't even have a problem to begin with. They just have a solution. So there's a slide missing. I guess it went wrong. So what do you want? You want teams with context. So they rarely ask for instructions to make decisions. So basically, you want teams that have a mission, right? Also what you talked about. You want them to have intent. What are we trying to achieve and why is it important? And because they understand that, they can make decisions. Because they have the context. They understand what we're trying to achieve. They can reframe the problem. Like maybe there's a different way. Maybe the problem isn't, like for example, if you ever travel to Schiphol at the airport, right? They actually make you walk for a long time. That's because when you walk, by the time you arrive, your luggage is going to be there. So instead of making the luggage belts have the luggage sooner, they make you walk. It's a reframing of the problem. And yeah, teams are challenged by their product managers. They challenge the product manager because they understand, why are we doing this? So you're actually moving authority to the people that have the best information, the people in your teams, and you're enabling decentralized decisions. And I'll go back. So the second, because I screwed up. So the second obstacle is inadequate autonomy. So I think we also talked about this today. Silos. Right? Teams depending on experts outside the team. I think your lovely Onion talks about the same thing, right? Like, so you want people to be dependent, not as independent as possible. So the problem is actually the real team is not in your team. So you're busy coordinating. So you need to have these cross-functional teams. This is nothing new. And then if they don't lack expertise, if they lack expertise or trust to make decisions, then they're going to ask, and then it's just going to take too long. You're not going to have short feedback loops. The other thing, so how do you notice inadequate autonomy? Teams must coordinate with many other teams. They can make decisions because they always need to talk to somebody outside the team. Wait, yeah, we need to talk to DevOps or we need to the QA, and they're not part of the team. And they're scared of making decisions due to the culture environment. So how do you fix this, right? You want to have teams that are as independent as possible. Like with your talk, with the decoupled architecture, right? That they're not always causing problems for each other. Teams should be able to make decisions without depending on others. And they need to have trust and psychological safety. And then they can take decisive action. The third obstacle, lack of collaboration. So yeah, you want people to be able to collaborate. Silos everywhere at once. Well, I think I don't need to tell all of you. Teams work in silos and horizontal slices. And when you need help from another team, you don't get it. Has anybody had this problem before? You need help? Yeah, I see people. Yeah, I've been there as well. I've actually been in a team where said, wait, we need help from another team. Is there a workaround we can come up with? Yeah, really, that was the first response. That was how terrible the collaboration was between teams. And that's why, we need to collaborate, right? But inter-team collaboration is far easier than intra-team collaboration. Bottlenecks, right? So yeah, we all know the story, the QA, testing, and then the developer, I've got nothing to do, and the QA is sweating, because they're the bottleneck. Those bottlenecks don't get resolved if you don't collaborate and think about, hey, this is the bottleneck, how do we resolve it? So you want to have vertical slices of value. Also, you mentioned that in your talk. You want teams to receive help as necessary, and you want them to quickly resolve bottlenecks. The fourth obstacle is alignment. Alignment is actually one of the biggest problems, and if you are not aligned, you're going to get chaos, cannibalization, and conflict. Teams fighting with each other, and then these people will say, "Yeah, let's do a workaround." That's easier than dealing with this mess. So if you go to a team, it's very easy. Just go to a team, ask them, do you know what other teams are working on? And I can tell you, many companies, they have no clue. So actually, 1 week ago, I was talking to a big airline, and they said, yeah, well, we once discovered 4 different teams working on the same trip recommendation service. 4 different teams in the same company. When teams need help, there's a big fight. Teams are working on too many different things at once, very common problem. And yeah, competing interests, like lots of competing interests. So finance wants something, sales wants something, and there's just and the teams are left to deal with the mess, right? They need to decide. So what you ideally want is teams moving along a shared trajectory. So they know what each other are working on. When they need help, it gets quietly resolved because they know what matters. They just decide, hey, we want to go here, so we know what's most important. We have a vision, we have a strategy, so our work is more important, or their work is more important, instead of our work is always more important. And yeah, it feels like people are pulling in the same direction instead of fighting each other. So why is fighting the Kraken difficult? The first problem is the longer you are part of a system, the more blind you become to the problems of the system. So in Dutch we have a saying, the beam of a lighthouse doesn't shine underneath the ground of a lighthouse. Right? So very often by being part of the system, you simply become blind to the problems because you develop coping mechanisms. The other problem is when you have an organizational system that makes it hard to make decisions, that same system will work against you to change it. So you have to follow the same hoops as the circus animals to change the system. And I think the third one is really important. Systems have organically evolved based on the mindset of the past, male-dominated companies, right? So they didn't evolve for the current times with AI, smaller teams. And yeah, that means they're not designed for the future necessarily. So a nice example is Lego. We talked about Lego, right? So fun story, Lego was almost bankrupt. And do you know why Lego was almost bankrupt? Because they always were making a lot of money. And then at one point in time, they didn't make so much money. So they were not tracking the profitability of their Lego sets. When they sold a Lego set, they didn't know if it was making money. They had no clue, which is insane, right, if you think about it. But it's because they developed, their organizational system developed based on conditions of the past. There was always money, so it didn't matter until it did. So you know what they did? Very simple. So maybe a little bit of context. You know why Lego is so expensive? It's because the mold costs like 100K for one brick. So if you make this little Darth Vader lightsaber, you use it in one set, you lose 100K. So unless you keep track of that, then you need to keep track of that to make profit and reuse items. And they did that, and now they're profitable again. And there are many other reasons, right? So what I want to stress, to fight the Kraken, one of the really crucial things is we need leaders with more guts, right? Because changing the organizational system, you need leadership and people to help with that. And a good example is Steve Jobs. So you probably have all heard the story from Steve Jobs who went back to Apple, right? Have you heard the story, the Steve Jobs returned to Apple and all the change he did? Yes? Is it familiar? So one change they rarely talk about, which was actually very crucial, is that when Steve Jobs returned to Apple, is that he sat down with every executive and he asked them, show me your P&L and how you're doing. And so the P&L is the profit and loss statement, how much money they were making and how much money they were losing. And every single one of them was painting the most beautiful picture of Apple. We're profitable. We're doing great. The second one, the third one, the 10th one, they're all profitable. There was only one problem. Apple was losing $1 billion per year. So yeah, and you know what he did? Very simple change. He moved the company to one P&L. So no more fighting, between departments, cost allocation games. And yeah, he had the guts to do that. And we need people like that, not like Elon Musk, who are too radical. So what does this mean for you, right? So how can you use this model? So first of all, what I want to say is, if you remember this first slide, I always had these ups and downs, right? So I've learned to be a bit more stoic. Let go of what you can't influence. Organizational systems all have problems. So you just got to find a system that has the shit that you can live with. That's maybe the first thing. And you can create high-performing teams, even in these organizations with Krakens. I did that in that organization with the great Post-it. It's definitely possible, but you'll bump into walls and your effort may not even be appreciated. But you're still fighting the good fight, so I'm rooting for you. So the strategy is, how do you do this? Start by creating a little oasis, Create a small pocket of product management excellence. Provide context. What are we trying to do here? Why does it matter? Those are simple things that you can really easily fix. And then as you move down, you will start to notice these systemic problems, right? The autonomy, for example, teams may mean changing teams or moving individuals around. And so that's more difficult. And lack of collaboration, I think, is one of the hardest nuts to crack because it's affected by the stuff at the top, right? If you lack context, it's hard to collaborate, but as well, if the organization is siloed, so it's really difficult, but it's really crucial. And lack of alignment is usually leadership problems like vision, strategy, and one thing which is really important, remove these institutionalized competing interests. Like if finance cares about fundamentally different thing than sales, they're going to fight each other, right? So in the Apple story, they have aligned objectives, and that's what helps. And your KPI tree, for example, is a good way of doing that with the OKRs because they're aligned. They're working towards the same things. And what I also want to stress, like fixing broken organizations, or maybe it's like fixing spaghetti code. You pull one thing up, and then something else goes up. It's very difficult. And this is why lots of organizations settle for surface level success. Like, we're doing the Spotify model, or we're doing OKRs, and yay, everything's solved. So use Cacao, use this model. You can help it to fight the Kraken. And the question is really simple. Do you want to have brittle teams that are busy dealing with the maybe nice, rude way of putting it, the bullshit of your organization? Or do you want them to be busy with the work and the results that you want? You want them to be adaptable and flexible towards that? And that's the question you should ask yourself. And if you remember two things, changing complex systems is much harder than developing product management expertise or expertise in Agile. And this is why Australia still has 200 million rabbits. So they did many things. They introduced diseases, walls. They cannot get rid of the rabbits. It's also why we still don't know if eggs are healthy or not, because we're a complex system as well. So when I was young, they said, don't eat eggs. Now they say, eggs are great. And in 20 years, who knows what they're going to say. And a bad system will beat a good person every time. Use Cacao. It's very simple. So I think the challenge is the leaders, this can act like a lighthouse to shine a light on the Kraken and the Tentacles and help you create more elastic teams. Feel free to send any questions you have to maarten@dalmijn.com. Thank you very much.
Yes, do we have questions? Comments? Anyone brought any rotten tomatoes?
Anybody worked with a Kraken where they got rid of some of the tentacles? It maybe aligns with this model? Like maybe somebody has to share a story of a success they had? Improving the collaboration, improving the alignment. Nobody? Come on. There's a room full of people. I know you're tired. Somebody must have a story.
Oh.
Yeah.
I do have a question, because I have seen some companies with some, maybe even more than one Kraken.
The Kraken of Krakens.
Maybe I'm a bit too pessimistic, but do you think there are companies that are beyond help?
That's a good question, right? So maybe, and this is also, I don't know the answer to that, to be frank. So one thing I want to say, right? So I'm also curious, maybe somebody has a story, but I don't know of a story of a large company with a huge Kraken that completely transformed their organization to be completely, I don't know that story. I know, I mean, if I look in the Netherlands, for example, the ING bank is always portrayed as the most agile bank in the Netherlands. It's all bullshit. But it's probably true, right? I want to say it's probably true in some parts of the organization, right? They've achieved some, like these oasis. They've achieved that, but maybe you have a lot of, maybe you know a story, right? But I don't, to be frank. And if anybody does, please raise your hand. Feel free to speak.
Okay.
Yes.
So I have a story, and I'm gonna try to make it interesting. But basically, I worked at this startup going on scale up, so around 300 persons working, and it was organized in silos, but not very granular silos. So we have development that were protected from everyone else, and that directly caused the lack of alignment, because the specifications were specifications that come from the business, because development wasn't part of business apparently, even though it was a product company. So that broke down, and the collaboration in turn broke down because the organizational system made it sure that we had too much things to do, and every team had their own goals. So even though we were friendly, we helped each other out, our priorities were not the same.
Yeah, and that's frustrating, right?
Yeah. Thankfully, our autonomy worked pretty good anyway, but the context were totally gone.
So one thing I would say, right, it's very easy to check if your team has contacts. Just look at the product backlog and ask yourself, if I were to join this company, can I figure out why we're doing this? Maybe it's looking at the epic, maybe it's looking, if you cannot find it out, then you're missing context. Like, it's very simple. As a product, I'm a product owner and a product manager. I always start with the intent, always. Like, why are we doing this? Because everything else flows from that. And it's very simple. And I can tell you one thing, most teams I join are not doing that. They're just describing the solution. And maybe there's someone that has it in their head, right? Like the problem, but yeah, you need to ask them. And sometimes they don't have it and they make it up. They reverse engineer the problem from the solution. Then you're kind of missing the point. Yes?
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Maarten, for a great presentation.
Thank you.
So I would believe that you're kind of preaching for the choir here with the audience, but I was thinking about this Kraken, and I do believe that many of us recognize it and have fought it for years at times. I was just kind of wondering here that if it all starts with on the organizational system level of things, top management and so on, who are completely oblivious to this Kraken fact.
Yeah, correct.
What can we or I or any who, as an individual, do to counteract this besides just trying to fight off the Kraken until we call it quits?
Yeah, that's basically what happens a lot. Yeah, it's a very, very good question.
Do you have any tips or anything?
So one thing which is very interesting, right? Most people say, like, if you read Agile advice, like, start at the top. And I think that's a terrible idea, because actually you should start with the teams, understand what's going on in the teams, what are the tentacles they're facing, and then, and I think this is what I hope to help achieve with this model. This provides you like a simple model, like managers love models, right? Like it's like a way to talk about it, to show them, hey, like if we all agree this is important, this is the areas where we can improve. But that's where I would start, like start helping the teams. The context and autonomy usually can already help a little bit with that, but then you're going to bump into walls, and this model can help you to talk about it. Hey, where are the problems? But the fact of the matter is, like realistically, like if you, for example, let's say the Dutch government, right? You've got 20 departments, 5 layers. Like I just think there's some problems you're not going to be able to tackle, at least not over the duration of your tenure. And maybe the only way it will happen is if there's a disaster, there's like urgency, like, hey, we need to reduce headcount by 50%. But I definitely would say, like, start with this, start creating a little oasis, start understanding the system, and then use that to communicate to the leadership team. And that the hardest part is usually the bottleneck isn't our expertise, it's our influencing skills. So do you have a relationship with them? Do you understand what they care about? And what's very hard is, because they're part of an organizational system, they all have competing interests. But if you understand all those competing interests, sometimes you're lucky. You can find a way, hey, this appeals to all their common interests, so I can maybe get them all on board. But influencing, I think, usually is the bottleneck. I was, early in my career, I was very much a smart ass saying, this is what we should do, and I had to learn that. So that was my bottleneck, not knowing what to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we should go to the retro, and thank you very much for all the good questions, interaction, despite it being the final talk. So applause for the audience.